The sun was unnaturally bright that morning, glinting off the polished doors of the Civil Affairs Bureau like a cruel joke. I clutched the manila folder in my hand, the contents of which would officially sever 5 years of my life. My heart was a lead weight in my chest, each beat a dull throb of bitterness and despair. Liam, my soon-to-be ex-husband, stood a few feet away, and beside him was Chloe. She was young, pretty in a delicate way, and her presence next to him felt like a physical wound. Their closeness, the way her shoulder brushed his arm, was a blade twisting in the ruins of my life. I had given him everything. We started in a studio apartment that was little more than a closet, surviving on instant noodles and desperate hope. I worked double shifts to support us while he built his career, from a penniless intern to a successful project manager. And this was my reward: betrayal and cold, calculated dismissal. That day after the papers were signed, I drove aimlessly for hours. The city was a blur of meaningless color and sound. Eventually, a compulsion I couldn't explain pulled me over. I found myself standing outside a lottery shop, its garish red sign a stark contrast to my gray inner world. Liam always called the lottery a tax on the stupid. With a bitter smile, I walked in and spent my last $20 on 10 quick-pick tickets. A final, foolish act for the foolish woman I had been. I never could have imagined those flimsy slips of paper would change everything. They won. The jackpot was an astronomical $25.7 billion. But the immense fortune didn't bring me happiness. It became my death sentence. When Liam and Chloe found out, greed consumed them. They orchestrated a perfect accidental car crash, and my world ended in a symphony of shattering glass and crushing metal. The last thing I felt was a searing wave of unwillingness, a bitter regret so potent it felt like a curse. Then I opened my eyes. I was standing once more at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau, the folder clutched in my hand, the sun just as harsh. The same scene was playing out. Liam was there, his head slightly lowered as Chloe, with her slender, pale fingers, reached up to fix his tie. Her touch was intimate, her gaze full of a devotion I recognized all too well. It was the same look I had given him once. She finished and lifted her chin, her voice a saccharine drip. "Amelia, from now on, please take good care of Liam." A cold, unnatural calm settled over me. This wasn't a memory. This was real. The feeling of the rough folder paper under my fingertips, the scent of Chloe's overpowering perfume, the weight of my own despair. It was all too vivid. I understood in a single breathtaking moment. I had been reborn. I had returned to this day, this hour. The knowledge was a lightning strike, burning away the despair and leaving behind a core of hardened steel. This time it would be different. This time those who had broken me would pay. "Don't bother," I heard myself say, my voice rough like sandpaper. "Mr. Thorne and I have nothing to do with each other anymore." Only then did Liam look at me, his gaze a complicated mix of fleeting guilt and a much stronger, restless urge to be rid of me. "Amelia, you already signed the property division agreement. The apartment is mine. You know how tight the projects are right now. There's no liquidity in the accounts. The car is old, but if you want it, take it. As for the rest, let's part on good terms." Part on good terms. I nearly laughed. 5 years of marriage, of pouring every ounce of my energy and love into him and our future. And in exchange I was left with a beat-up Honda Civic on its last legs. The apartment, bought under a joint agreement before marriage, was now solely his, despite my contributions to the mortgage and my financial support that allowed his career to advance. The savings? All tied up in projects. He was counting on my pride, my unwillingness to strip away the facade and drag us through a messy court battle over money. I watched as Liam and Chloe walked toward his brand-new Audi Q7, the car I had suggested he get 6 months ago to present a more successful image to clients. The last trace of warmth in my heart froze over and shattered. "Fine," I forced out the single word, gripping the thin divorce booklet that felt heavy enough to crush my entire world. I turned and walked away before I lost control. Tears burned, hot and sharp behind my eyes, but I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood, refusing to let them fall. A man like that isn't worth it. My old Honda was parked at the curb, its dull gray paint a perfect reflection of my mood. I slid inside, and the sun-baked stench of cheap leather and stale coffee rushed up to meet me. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel, my shoulders trembling uncontrollably. 25 to 30, the best years of a woman's life, wasted on a man who was less than a dog. My phone buzzed, a jarring sound in the heavy silence. It was my best friend, Isabella. Amelia, how did it go? That bastard didn't pull any last-minute tricks, did he? Her voice, loud and fiery even through the speaker, was a lifeline of worry and anger. I sniffled, trying to sound normal. It's over. The divorce is final. The property, the apartment. What about the savings? What did he say? Isabella's voice shot up an octave, sharp with disbelief. The apartment's his. He said the savings are all tied up in his projects and can't be withdrawn. He just gave me the old car. I let out a bitter laugh. I signed the papers. There was a 2-second silence on the other end before she exploded. Amelia Thorne, are you out of your mind? He says it's tied up, so you just believe him? He's hidden the assets. He planned this from the start. Wait for me, I'm getting a colleague to look into this right now. Damn it, he's gone too far this time. Her fury was a warm current, easing some of the suffocating weight on my chest. Isabella was a lawyer. She knew every dirty trick in the book when it came to divorce disputes. Isabella, I interrupted her, a mountain of exhaustion crashing down on me. Forget it. I don't want anything more to do with him. Money can be earned again. I just want this to be over. I'm disgusted. I'm so tired. It was the truth. Fighting him would mean more contact, more of his manipulations, grinding down what little dignity I had left. And Liam knew that about me. He'd always known how to use my pride against me. Isabella let out a long, heavy sigh. You and your pride. You always suffer for it. Fine. At least it's done. The sooner you throw away trash like that, the cleaner you'll be. Where are you? I'll come pick you up. We're celebrating tonight. Big dinner, big drinks, celebrating your freedom. No, Isabella. I looked out the window at the blinding sunlight. Liam and Chloe were gone. I just need to be alone for a while. I hung up and the car sank back into silence. The engine's hum sounded weak and lifeless. That so-called home was now theirs. I had packed all my things yesterday. They were piled in a corner of Isabella's guest room. I had nowhere else to go. A heavy fog of emptiness pressed down on me as I drove aimlessly. The cityscape flashed by the windows, a meaningless montage of a life that was no longer mine. At a red light, I stopped at an intersection. Next to me was the same lottery shop, its huge red sign blaring that today's jackpot had reached $25 billion. On an impulse that felt both foreign and fated, I pulled over. In my pocket were a few crumpled bills left over from paying the divorce processing fee. A tax on this stupid, Liam's voice echoed in my head. Might as well burn some paper money for the old me, I thought, a grim smile touching my lips. I pushed the door open and walked straight in. The shop was quiet. The owner, a balding middle-aged man, was glued to short videos on his phone. I slapped a 20 on the counter. Quick pick. 10 double-color ball tickets, I said, my voice flat. The owner mumbled without looking up, tapping skillfully at the machine. A long slip of paper slid out. I took the thin ticket, its string of random, meaningless numbers cold and unfamiliar, and stuffed it into my worn canvas tote bag. It lay right next to the little red divorce booklet, the 2 slips of paper pressed together. An ending and a bizarre potential beginning. When I stepped back into the sunlight, I shook my head at myself with a mocking smile. Amelia Thorne, you really are pathetic. I drove the shabby car around the city until nightfall, finally parking by the river. The evening breeze carried the damp, slightly fishy scent of the water. Sitting in the car, I gazed across at the glittering lights on the opposite shore. Thousands of warm, shining windows, but not a single one belonged to me. A crushing loneliness rose like an icy tide, slowly drowning me. The screen of my phone lit up. It was a text from Liam. Amelia, I know you're angry. But getting to this point, we both share responsibility. The apartment and savings are really difficult for me right now. I hope you can understand. From here on, let's each live our own lives well. Understand? Live our own lives well. I stared at the message, every word a poison needle stabbing into my heart. He was always like this, so high and mighty, painting his betrayal and calculation as shared responsibility, then sending me fake, condescending blessings for the future. Rage, cold and sharp, shook through me. My fingers tightened until my knuckles were white, but I had no desire to reply. I deleted the message and dragged his number into the blacklist. Finally, the world felt a little cleaner. The next few days I wandered like a ghost through Isabella's guest room. I slept, I woke, I stared at the ceiling. I survived on instant noodles and bottled water. Every evening when Isabella got off work she would curse Liam 300 times over, then hug me and say, "Amelia, you need to pull yourself together. He's not worth it. Start looking for work. Three-legged frogs are hard to find, but two-legged men and good jobs are everywhere." I knew she was right. I began sending out resumes. But the reality was cold and brutal. 30 years old, divorced with a 2-year gap in my career for family reasons. Most of my resumes vanished into a silent void. The few interviews I landed ended the moment the HR manager, with a sympathetic yet final smile, asked about my marital status and the employment gap. The crushing weight of life, of mere survival, was suffocating me far more than the grief of the divorce itself. I counted the pitiful balance in my bank account, worrying about next month's rent. Isabella refused to take a dime from me, but I couldn't live on her charity forever. For the first time, a sliver of regret, sharp and insidious, began to worm its way into my heart. Maybe I should have fought harder at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Maybe I should have ripped the mask off and demanded what I was rightfully owed. That night I was listlessly scrolling through job boards again, finding nothing but dead ends. Irritated, I opened a video app wanting to numb myself with some mindless entertainment. That's when a breaking news alert popped up on my screen. Last night's lottery drawing produced a record-breaking jackpot. One lucky player won first prize 5 times with a total payout of $25.7 billion, the largest single win in the history of the state lottery. The accompanying picture showed a giant red banner hanging outside a lottery shop. The astronomical prize amount was printed in bold, impossible-to-miss numbers. My heart stopped. Then it began to hammer against my ribs. 10 quick-pick double-color ball tickets. An absurd, dangerous thought wrapped around my mind like a vine. I scrambled off the bed, practically on my hands and knees, tearing through the mess on the floor for my canvas tote bag. My fingers trembled, fumbling in the inner pocket until I felt 2 thin slips of paper. One the divorce certificate. The other the lottery ticket covered in dense rows of numbers. Holding my breath, I opened my phone's browser with shaking hands and typed in last night's winning numbers. The results popped up clearly. Red balls. 03, 07, 14, 21, 26, 33. Blue ball. 09. My eyes locked on the first line of numbers on my ticket. 03, 07, 14, 21, 26, 33 plus 09. A perfect match. My brain went blank. A high-pitched buzzing filled my ears as if 10,000 bees had taken flight at once. Mechanically I looked at the second line. Another match. The third, the fourth, until the 5th. All 5 sets of numbers were identical. 5 first prize tickets. $25.7 billion. The figure detonated in my barren, broken spirit like an atomic bomb. There was no wild joy, no screaming euphoria. Only an overwhelming, terrifying sense of unreality, as if I had stepped outside the laws of physics. My strength drained away completely. I slid down from the bed, collapsing onto the cold, hard floor. The canvas bag fell at my feet, spilling out the scarlet divorce certificate and the flimsy ticket worth billions. I stared at them for a long time. The red cover of a past that had killed me, and the cold numbers of a future that had brought me back. Despair on one side. And on the other, an indescribable, formidable possibility. After the shock came a chilling, preternatural calm. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Isabella. It wasn't that I didn't trust her. But the money was too colossal, too hot to handle. It felt unreal and I needed time to process it. More than that, I needed absolute, unwavering caution. The memory of my previous death was a fresh, bloody brand on my soul. Greed had killed me once. It would not happen again. The next morning I dressed with more care than I had in weeks. I told Isabella the first had a job interview. It wasn't a lie, not really. I was going to work. I was going to war. With a mask and a baseball cap pulled low over my face, I called a cab and gave the driver the address for the state lottery headquarters. The entire process there was like moving through a dream, a preset program I was following. Verifying my identity, the endless checking and rechecking of the ticket, confirming the winning information, signing stacks of official documents. I gave a brief, bland interview, uttering polite, generic phrases about feeling lucky and promising to make proper financial arrangements. For the commemorative photo, I wore the giant, grinning cartoon mascot head they provided, hiding my face completely from the world. At the end of it all, I was handed a different kind of slip, an official bank voucher representing a sum of over $200 million after taxes. The staff were professional, but their curiosity and thinly veiled envy were palpable. A kindly-looking middle-aged woman leaned in and whispered, "Miss, don't flaunt this. Stay low-key when you leave and make careful plans." I nodded, my voice muffled by the mask. "Thank you. I will." As I stepped out of the lottery center, the blazing midday sun poured down on me. I stood on the busy sidewalk, gripping that feather-light slip of paper that weighed more than a mountain of gold. There was no wild euphoria, no drunken sense of sudden wealth. Only a heavy, steady, and crystal-clear clarity. This money was no longer a distant number. It was mine. But with its possession came an even sharper, more lethal vigilance. This fortune could never be exposed. Especially not to Liam or to Chloe or to anyone who might lead them to me. My next stop was the bank. I was ushered into a private, soundproofed room where a team of wealth managers in impeccably tailored suits awaited me. We spoke of airtight confidentiality agreements, complex asset allocation, and long-term strategies. The money was scattered, made invisible. It flowed into blind trusts, government bonds, stable, low-profile funds, and international real estate holdings. In my personal accounts, I kept only a fraction. A sum that would allow for a comfortable, secure life, but never enough to attract unwanted attention or raise questions. The first thing I did with my accessible funds was to take care of Isabella. I transferred a life-changing amount to her, enough to pay off her student loans and then some. It wasn't a reckless giveaway. It was a calculated gesture of gratitude, one that fit the narrative I was building. I called her, keeping my tone light. "Isabella, payday's here. That money I owed you, principal plus interest, take it. And I'm treating you to that outrageously expensive French place you've been stalking online forever." On the other end she screamed, "Amelia Thorne, are you possessed? What kind of job pays you this much? Don't tell me you finally caved and found yourself a sugar daddy." Her voice was half joking, half deadly serious. I laughed, the sound feeling strange but genuine. "Get lost. An old client introduced me to a massive project and it went through. Huge commission. All legal, above-board income. No nonsense. 7 tonight, I'll send you the address." After hanging up, I let out a slow, controlled breath. Her suspicion was natural, but blaming it on a project commission was a plausible cover for now. Helping her, easing her burdens, gave me a profound sense of peace. It was the first good thing I had been able to do with this cursed, miraculous money. I moved out of Isabella's guest room almost immediately. I didn't buy a mansion. That would be a beacon for trouble. Instead, I rented a spacious, secure apartment in a discreet, high-end complex downtown, paying a year's rent in advance in cash. The old Honda Civic was donated to a charity and replaced by a safe, comfortable mid-range Volvo SUV. Understated, reliable, and utterly unremarkable. Life on the surface seemed to slide onto a new, calm, and abundant track. I filled my days with purposeful activity. I signed up for courses I'd always wanted to take. Art history, conversational Italian, financial management. Under the guidance of my new advisors, I began to learn the intricacies of wealth management, making small, cautious investments. For me, the money was no longer just a number. It was an education. It was control. It was the deeply satisfying process of building something with my own mind and hands. Yet, deep beneath the calm surface, the scar Liam had left still ached. His betrayal, his cold calculation, was like a fine splinter buried deep under the skin, pricking me with a sharp pain at unexpected moments. I forced myself not to dwell on it, to focus on my new life. Then, a month into my rebirth, my high school alumni group chat, long dormant, suddenly lit up. The class president was organizing our 10-year reunion at a well-known, upscale restaurant in the city. Liam was in the group too. He quickly replied, "I'll definitely be there," bringing the family, smiley face followed by a smiling emoji. The message hit me like a physical blow. The group chat immediately erupted. "Whoa, Liam, you kept this secret long enough. When did you get married? Is your wife pretty? Post a picture. Congratulations. A double blessing." I watched, my stomach twisting into a cold knot, as Liam typed his triumphant response. "Just got the certificate, so I'm bringing her out to meet everyone. She's younger and a little shy, so please take care of her. Every word dripped with pride and the smugness of a newlywed. The family he was so eager to parade was without a doubt Chloe. He couldn't wait to present her to all our old classmates, to announce his victory and erase every last trace of my existence from his narrative. A chill of pure, undiluted anger surged from the soles of my feet straight to the top of my head. 5 years of my life, of hardship and sacrifice by his side, had been reduced to a cruel joke. My patience, my concessions had only bought me his arrogance and his ruthless trampling. Isabella's call came almost instantly, her voice blazing through the phone. "Amelia, did you see the group chat? That bastard Liam, he's doing this on purpose. Absolutely on purpose. Dragging that homewrecker out to show off. Damn it, I'm so furious. Don't you dare go. Don't torture yourself." My fingertips were icy as I held the phone, but my voice when I spoke was unnaturally calm. "I'm going." "Going? Why?" Isabella was stunned. I looked out the window of my new apartment at the city's glittering lights reflected in the glass. In the faint reflection, my own face appeared calm. Cold even. "Before," I said slowly, "I didn't go to things like this because I was afraid. Afraid of the memories, afraid I wasn't good enough, afraid I'd lose control in front of him and make a scene." I paused, a faint, cold smile touching the corners of my lips. "But now, the one who should feel ashamed, the one who should be afraid to face me, it's not me." The battlefield was set. And this time I was armed not with desperation but with absolute power. The day of the reunion I didn't dress for a battle. I dressed for a victory parade. I chose a sleeveless, sheath dress in a deep emerald green. The cut was simple, severe even, but the fabric was raw silk that caught the light with a subtle, expensive sheen. It was the kind of dress that whispered wealth and taste rather than screaming it. I added only 2 pieces of jewelry, small diamond studs that glittered with a cold fire and a slim, platinum bracelet. My makeup was flawless but understated, and I'd pulled my hair back into a low, sleek chignon. The handbag was a structured black leather piece from a brand known only to those who moved in certain circles. The overall effect was one of quiet, unassailable confidence. Isabella pulled up in her little sports car, her eyes widening as I slid into the passenger seat. "Wow. Just wow, Amelia. You look..." She gestured, searching for the word. "You look expensive. And dangerous. I love it." "Good," I said, my voice calm. "That's the vibe. I'm doing amazing and I couldn't care less about proving it to them." The private room at Le Jardin was already buzzing with the sound of forced laughter and clinking glasses when we arrived. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and subtle competition. And there, holding court near the center of the room, was Liam. He wore a new, sharply tailored navy suit, his hair perfectly styled. He had one arm draped possessively around Chloe, who was clinging to his side like a delicate vine. She was wearing a ruffled pink cocktail dress that was a little too young, a little too try-hard. She looked pretty, nervous, and utterly triumphant. The moment Isabella and I crossed the threshold, a hush fell over our immediate vicinity. Dozens of eyes swiveled toward us. I saw curiosity, pity, and in a few the gleeful anticipation of drama. Liam's smile faltered for a fraction of a second when he saw me. Surprise, then a flicker of something like confusion passed over his face. He had clearly expected a ghost, a hollowed-out version of the wife he'd discarded. He had not expected this calm, polished woman who looked like she had never heard his name. Chloe's grip on his arm tightened, her smile becoming strained. Her eyes, when they met mine, were sharp with vigilance and a clear, undisguised hostility. "Amelia. Isabella. You made it." The class president, Ben, hurried over, his voice overly hearty as he tried to diffuse the tension. "Come on in, we saved you seats." The seating arrangement was either a masterpiece of social cruelty or a simple oversight. Our places were at a table directly adjacent to Liam's, separated only by a narrow aisle. It was a staging ground for a silent war. The dinner was a tedious parade of small talk and reminiscence that I floated through. Liam naturally became a focal point. He held forth loudly about his latest massive project, a commercial development on the outskirts of the city, lamenting the crushing pressure and financial complexities, in a tone that was meant to convey his immense importance. "And the cash flow is just a nightmare," he was saying to a captivated circle. You have to keep so much capital liquid it's paralyzing. He then turned and fussed over Chloe, feeding her a morsel from his plate and whispering something that made her giggle, a high tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Aw, Liam, you're such a doting husband," a woman named Sarah cooed. "She's so lucky." One of his old buddies, Mark, grinned and nudged Liam. "And look at your wife, man. So stylish. That necklace she's wearing, that's not a diamond, is it? You really splashed out." Liam gave a modest, practiced smile, not denying it. Chloe lowered her head demurely, her fingers brushing the sparking pendant at her throat. "As long as she's happy," Liam said in a doting tone, and his eyes, full of smug superiority, casually swept across the table and landed on me. The unspoken message was clear. See what I can provide? See what you lost. Under the table, Isabella pinched my thigh hard, her eyes wide with a silent scream. "Don't you dare react." I took a slow sip of my San Pellegrino, the bubbles sharp on my tongue, and kept my face a placid mask. I was surprised by the depth of my own calm. When you are no longer drowning, the waves that once terrified you seem small, insignificant. But Liam, it seemed, was unsatisfied. My lack of reaction was a provocation in itself. He suddenly raised his voice slightly, pitching it to Carrie to our table. "By the way, Amelia," he began, his tone dripping with false concern. "I heard you've been on the job hunt. How's that going? It's a tough market. Actually," he leaned forward conspiratorially, "our admin department is short a filing clerk. It's not glamorous and the pay is, well, it's a paycheck. But if you're desperate, I could put in a word with HR. For old time's sake." The air at our table froze solid. Conversations nearby died out. All eyes were on us again. His words were a masterclass in public humiliation, disguised as charity. He was painting me as a desperate, unemployable divorcee, while positioning himself as the magnanimous benefactor. Chloe, the perfect puppet, chimed in with sweetly vicious naivety. "Yes, Amelia, Liam is so kind-hearted. Jobs are so hard to find these days, especially for women at our age. Can be a bit awkward, can't it? Having something stable to fall back on is actually pretty good." She deliberately emphasized our age, though she was a good 7 years my junior. Isabella's face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson. I felt her body tense, ready to launch across the table. I placed a firm, restraining hand over hers on the tablecloth. Under the gaze of our former classmates, some sympathetic, others morbidly curious, I set my glass down precisely. I lifted my head and met Liam's proud, scrutinizing stare, and the naked contempt in Chloe's eyes. A small, gentle smile spread across my lips. "Thank you for your concern, Liam," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying easily in the quiet room. "But there's no need to trouble yourself. I just took on a small project recently, so all my energy is focused there. I don't have the bandwidth to consider a career change right now." Liam's eyebrows shot up. Skepticism was written all over his face. "A project? Really?" he asked, his tone patronizing. "What kind of project? Maybe I can give you some advice. The business world can be ruthless for a novice." His "I'm the expert here" aura was almost tangible. Around us, people leaned in, ears straining. What project could a newly divorced woman possibly have? I looked at him with a gaze of utter neutrality, as if he were a stranger who had asked for the time. "Nothing special. Just an investment with a few partners. We acquired a small mixed-use development plot in the South City New District. A side project, really." Liam froze for a second, then let out a short, derisive laugh. He leaned back in his chair, adopting the posture of a seasoned professor about to educate a foolish student. "Amelia, let me give you some friendly advice," he began, that insufferable know-it-all tone coding every word. "Real estate investment isn't a game. The South City New District is a graveyard. The infrastructure is a joke. The planning committee has been about to announce developments for a decade, and every speculator who's gone in there has been burned. Who talked you into this? You need to pull your money out fast. Cut your losses. Just find a stable job. That's the sensible path." He finished with a look of pained sincerity, as if he were genuinely worried about my financial ruin. A few of his sycophants nodded in agreement. "Yeah, Amelia, South City is a dead zone," Mark added. "Liam knows this industry inside and out. You should listen to him." "Investments need to be so careful these days," Sarah chimed in, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. I let them finish. I let their chorus of condescension hang in the air. When the last echo of their advice faded, I spoke, my tone measured, each word dropping into the silence like a stone into a still pond. Is that so? I asked, a faint smile playing on my lips. How funny. I heard that Ethelred Holdings just signed an exclusive strategic agreement with the South City Development Committee. The entire municipal focus for the next 5 years will be centered there. And the extension of the Metro Line 7. Its final approval came through last week. The terminal station will be right at the entrance of our property. The moment the name Ethelred Holdings left my mouth, a name that only appeared in high-level financial briefings, not yet public knowledge, the entire room fell into a stunned, profound silence. Liam's face went slack. It was as if someone had simply deleted his expression. His smug superiority, his fake concern, all of it solidified, then crumbled into dust. His eyes widened, staring at me in utter, uncomprehending disbelief. His lips parted, but no sound emerged. As a building materials manager, he was hypersensitive to real estate news. Ethelred Holdings. Metro planning. If what I said was true, the wasteland he had just mocked was about to become the most valuable piece of real estate in the city. You. He finally stammered, his voice dry and raspy. Who told you that? Is that information reliable? His facade had not just cracked. It had vaporized. He couldn't maintain the act. The classmates around us looked bewildered. They didn't understand the jargon, but they understood the complete and total collapse of Liam Thorne's composure. Those who had seconds ago been parroting his dismissal were now staring at their plates, suddenly fascinated by the pattern of the china. I offered a faint, cool smile devoid of any boastfulness, radiating only a quiet detachment that saw straight through his pathetic posturing. The source isn't something I can disclose, I said calmly. I let my gaze rest on his ashen face for a beat longer, delivering the final killing blow. As for reliability, the official announcement will be made public early next month. When that happens, Manager Thorne, you'll know. I didn't spare him or the gaping Chloe another glance. I turned to Isabella, whose mouth was hanging open in glorious, shocked delight. Isabella, I said softly. It's a bit stuffy in here. Shall we get some air on the terrace? Still riding the high of second-hand vindication, Isabella practically leaped to her feet. Let's go. It really is stifling in here. Her loud, cheerful voice shattered the tense silence. She linked her arm through mine, and together we strolled out of the private room, leaving a wake of stunned silence and shattered egos behind us. The moment the terrace doors closed, cutting off the muted noise from inside, Isabella grabbed my shoulders, her eyes wide and shining. Holy crap, Amelia, she hissed, her voice a mixture of awe and exhilaration. You are incredible. Do you have any idea? His face. It was greener than that dress. I've never seen anything so satisfying in my entire life. South City? Ethelred Holdings? Was that real? Since when did you get into the big leagues? And why am I always the last to know? Leaning against the cool metal railing, I looked out at the city lights sprawling beneath us. The night breeze was cool on my skin, a welcome balm. Isabella, I said, my voice low. Do you remember that big project I told you about? The one with the large commission? Her eyes, already wide, threatened to pop out of their sockets. Her mouth formed a perfect silent "oh." It took her a full 10 seconds to find her voice. You mean the lottery? She whispered, the word itself seeming dangerous. Oh my God. So you're the one behind that South City development. I gave a small, single nod. I used a portion of the capital to partner with some very sharp investors. We secured the land just before the rumors started. The Ethelred news was confirmed through internal channels. I didn't tell her I was the majority stakeholder, the silent engine funding the entire operation. Isabella sucked in a sharp breath, clutching her chest as if she might have a heart attack. Over 200 million. After tax. Oh my God, Amelia. You really did make a fortune in silence. She stared at me, then a huge, uncontrollable grin spread across her face. And just now, the way you just dropped that bomb so casually. Liam's face. She burst into laughter, a rich, joyful sound that echoed in the night air, tears of pure schadenfreude springing to her eyes. I can't. It was priceless. Let him brag. Let him act high and mighty. Let him look down on you. And now look at him. Completely and utterly owned. Her laughter was infectious and I found myself smiling, a real, genuine smile. But mine wasn't fueled by the fiery joy of revenge. It was something cooler, more profound. A sense of release, of a weight I hadn't even realized I was still carrying finally being lifted. Using wealth to slap someone in the face was viscerally satisfying, yes. But what truly filled me with a deep, unshakable calm was the feeling of absolute control. I was no longer the woman to be judged, discarded, or pitted by Liam Thorne. My value, my destiny was mine alone to define. The ride home was a giddy stream of Isabella replaying the scene over and over. Did you see Chloe's face? She looked like she'd just swallowed a lemon. And Mark, that kiss up, he didn't know where to look. I let her talk, my own mind already moving forward. The first skirmish was over. I had won. But I knew Liam. Humiliation for him was not a lesson. It was a catalyst for obsession. I was right. The official announcement about the South City New District and Ethelred Holdings broke 2 weeks later, just as I had predicted. Property values in the area tripled overnight. My initial investment was now worth more than 10 times its original value. And Liam completely lost his mind. The calls started first. My private number, which he must have gotten from someone in the alumni group, lit up. When I didn't answer, he started calling Isabella, who would send me screenshots of his increasingly unhinged texts. Amelia, you knew. You set me up. You knew about Ethelred and you let me make a fool of myself. Then a few days later, Amelia, I was wrong. I was an idiot. A fool. Please, can we talk? For the sake of what we had? Then the desperate business proposal. Grace, a partnership. Bring me in on your next project. I have resources, connections. We can do 50/50ths. No, 70/30ths. You 70 me 30. Just give me a chance. I never responded. Every call was blocked, every text ignored, every social media friend request denied. He was a pitiful clown, performing a desperate one-man show for an audience of one who had long since left the theater. His final act of desperation came about a month after the reunion. He somehow found out where I lived. I was stepping out of my Volvo in the secure underground parking garage of my apartment building when a figure detached itself from the shadows near the elevator. Amelia. He looked terrible. His face was unshaven, his eyes sunken and bloodshot. His suit, once always crisp, was wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. The confident man from the reunion was gone, replaced by a desperate, haunted shell. Amelia, wait. Please, just 5 minutes. I'm begging you. He spread his arms, trying to block my path to the elevator. The security guard stationed in the lobby, a large, vigilant man named Frank, saw the commotion on the monitor and was out the door in an instant. Sir, step away from the resident, Frank said, his voice firm and polite but leaving no room for argument as he positioned himself between Liam and me. I'm her ex-husband. We know each other. I just need to talk to her, it's important. Liam protested, trying to sidestep Frank. I stopped, my keys in my hand, and watched his pathetic struggle. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, not even disgust. Just a vast, empty stillness. Mr. Thorne, I said, my voice flat and cold, carrying easily in the concrete space. There is nothing left to say. Leave now or I will have security call the police. Liam's eyes widened, a wild, panicked look in them. You can't be this heartless. We had 5 years together. I know I wronged you. I was worse than scum. I regret it, I really do. He was practically babbling. That girl, Chloe, she's a liar. A gold digger. She doesn't understand me, she just spends. I was deceived. He was now throwing his new wife under the bus, scrambling to find any lever that might stir my sympathy. How I see it, Amelia. You were the only one who was ever real to me. Let's remarry. I'll divorce her right now. We can start over. And with the South City project, we can join forces. We can be unstoppable. I felt my lips curl into a cold, mocking smile. It was the most grotesque performance I had ever witnessed. When you threw me away for her, I said, my voice cutting through his pleas like a shard of ice, you fed whatever love we had to the dogs. You're not regretting losing me, Liam. You're regretting losing a stepping stone. Remarry? Partner up. I shook my head slowly, my eyes filled with absolute final contempt. What makes you think I would ever look twice at your pitiful resources, or your greedy self-serving heart? Each word was a lash stripping him bare. His face cycled through red, white, and a sickly green, before finally settling into a lifeless, ashen gray. He stared at me, and in his eyes, I saw the last flicker of hope, of scheming, of resentment, all crumble into utter despair and humiliation. He finally truly understood. The woman standing before him was on a peak he could never hope to climb. She was looking down from a height he could never reach, and she found him insignificant. "Leave," I said. It was my final word to him, sharp and absolute. Without another glance, I turned, swiped my key card, and stepped into the bright, secure lobby. The heavy glass door hissed shut behind me, completely and permanently shutting out the twisted, desperate face of my past. A profound, echoing quiet settled in my soul. It was over. The silence after Liam's final departure was not an emptiness, but a fertile ground. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, my mind was not occupied with survival, grief, or plotting. It was simply clear. The revenge I had craved, the validation I had secretly needed, was complete. I had stood on the higher ground and found the view of him so insignificant it was barely worth a glance. Now a more pressing question remained. What would I do with this immense, unexpected life I had been given? The money, now expertly managed and growing with a quiet, relentless efficiency, was a tool. But a tool for what? More investments? A life of idle luxury? The thought of endless days spent shopping, lunching, and traveling felt as hollow as my marriage had become. The fortune that had once killed me needed a purpose to justify its second chance. The idea didn't come in a lightning bolt of inspiration, but as a slow, persistent pull. It started with a documentary Isabella made me watch about disappearing artisanal crafts in the remote provinces. I saw the gnarled, skilled hands of an old woman weaving a fabric so intricate it looked like stained glass. I saw the patient, ancient eyes of a nomadic man felting wool into patterns that told stories of his ancestors. And I saw the despair in their eyes when they spoke of their children moving to the cities, of no market for their painstaking work, of traditions dying with them. A memory long buried surfaced. My grandmother, before Alzheimer's had stolen her away, was a master of embroidery. She tried to teach me when I was a girl, her hands guiding my clumsy fingers. I had been impatient, bored. I remembered the look on her face, not anger but a profound sadness, as she put her hoop away. "No one has the time anymore, my little Amelia," she had sighed. "The world is moving too fast for slow beauty." Sitting in my silent, expensive apartment, surrounded by things that held no memory, I finally understood that look. It wasn't just about embroidery. It was about connection, about a thread of culture and history that was being severed. The lead weight in my chest, which I had thought was the divorce, shifted. It was the weight of all that was being lost, forgotten, paved over by a world obsessed with the new, the fast, the cheap. I have the time, I thought, a strange excitement stirring in me. I have the resources. I can be a dam against that tide. I called it the Legacy Studio. The name came to me fully formed. It wasn't about me, Amelia. It was about what was left behind. I found a space on the top floor of a renovated warehouse in the Arts District. It had floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the place with northern light, exposing beams of old, solid timber and brick walls that whispered of a different era. It was perfect. Furnishing it was a joy unlike any I had ever known. I didn't hire a high-priced interior designer. I worked with a local woodworker to create custom tables from reclaimed barn wood. I sourced textiles directly from the communities I had only seen on screen. A vibrant, hand-woven rug from the mountains became the centerpiece of the main room. Delicate, embroidered panels from a river town hung on the brick walls, their silken threads catching the light. The studio wasn't just an office. It was a living gallery, a testament to the beauty it was meant to preserve. Building a team was my next task. I didn't want corporate sharks or marketing gurus. I sought out true believers. I hired Maya, a fiercely intelligent and empathetic cultural anthropologist, to be my head of artist relations. She was the one who would travel to the farthest corners, find the artisans and gain their trust. Then there was David, a quiet, brilliant strategist who had burned out from the soulless grind of a major advertising firm. He saw this as a redemption arc, a way to use his powers for good. His mission was to build sustainable business models, not to maximize profit, but to ensure survival and fair wages. Our mission was clear and ruthless in its own way. identify traditional art forms on the brink of extinction, partner with the master artisans, and build a bridge to the modern world without sacrificing the soul of the craft. Our first major project found us, in a way. Maya returned from a scouting trip to the southwestern mountains, her camera full of breathtaking images and her eyes full of fire. She told me about Granny Lin, a woman in her 80s who was the last in her village to practice the art of lanhua, or orchid cloth. The process was agonizingly slow, involving the extraction of dye from a specific wild orchid, a secret mordant from a mountain root, and hand-weaving on a loom her grandfather had built. The resulting fabric was a shimmering pale blue that seemed to hold the sky and the mist of the mountains within it. She made maybe 2 bolts a year. Her granddaughter, a bright girl of 20, wanted to move to the city to work in a factory. "We can't let this die, Amelia," Maya said, her voice tight with emotion. "It's not just cloth. It's a library of botanical knowledge, of history, woven into every thread." I looked at the photos. I saw Granny Lin's hands, gnarled and stained with dye, and the fierce, proud light in her eyes. I saw the breathtaking beauty of the cloth. And I saw the perfect test case for the Legacy Studio. "Set it up," I said. "We're going in." A week later, I found myself in a village that seemed to cling to the side of a mountain, shrouded in clouds. The air was thin and cold, scented with pine and wood smoke. Granny Lin's house was a simple wooden structure, but inside, it was a sanctuary. Bolts of the legendary orchid cloth were stacked carefully, glowing in the dim light. Through Maya's translation, I spoke to Granny Lin. I didn't offer charity. I offered a partnership. We would provide a monthly stipend that was 3 times what she could make in a year, guaranteeing her financial security. We would fund an apprentice program, starting with her granddaughter and any other young person in the village who was willing to learn, paying them a fair wage to do so. In return, the Legacy Studio would have the exclusive right to help design and market products using her cloth. Granny Lin listened, her sharp, dark eyes fixed on my face. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. Then she spoke, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. She says, Maya translated, a smile breaking out on her face, that the city woman has old eyes. She says she has been waiting for a sign to pass on her knowledge before she joins the ancestors. You are her sign. Tears pricked my eyes, a completely unexpected reaction. It was the first real, untainted connection I had felt in years. It had nothing to do with money or revenge or survival. It was about legacy. Back in the city, David worked his magic. Instead of trying to sell entire bolts of the prohibitively expensive cloth, we focused on accessible, high-impact products. We partnered with a master bag maker to create a limited run of clutches and folios, where the orchid cloth was the stunning centerpiece. We worked with a bespoke tailor to create exquisite accent panels on jackets and shawls. We didn't hide the story, we made it the center of our marketing. We told the story of Granny Lin, of the mountain orchids, of the generations of knowledge in every stitch. The collection launched on a curated online platform. It sold out in 47 minutes. The press picked up the story. Suddenly, the Legacy Studio wasn't just a passion project. It was a talked-about, successful social enterprise. Sitting in my studio watching the orders flood in and reading the emails from customers who were moved by the story, I felt a sense of accomplishment that dwarfed any lottery win. This was creation. This was meaning. One evening, I was working late, reviewing plans for our next project with a nomadic community in the northern grasslands, when Isabella came by, carrying a bottle of champagne and takeout from our favorite Thai place. "You're a hard woman to pin down these days, so Thorne," she said, kicking off her heels and sprawling on the plush sofa I had made from hand-felted wool. I laughed, closing my laptop. "It's busy. In a good way." She looked around the studio, her gaze taking in the beautiful, purposeful chaos. "I'm proud of you, you know," she said, her tone uncharacteristically soft. "When you got the money, I was worried. I've seen what sudden wealth does to people. But you didn't let it twist you. You used it to become more, you." Her words settled deep inside me. He was right. The money hadn't changed my core. It had given my core the freedom to express itself fully. The woman who had supported Liam's ambitions, who had worked tirelessly to build a home, was still there. But now her energy was directed toward building something that truly mattered, something that would outlast her. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from David. "Just got the final numbers. The Granny Lin collection has generated enough profit to fund the apprentice program for the next 5 years. And we've had 3 major retailers approaching us for collaborations. Also, National Geographic wants to do a feature. I showed the text to Isabella. Her eyes widened. National Geographic? Amelia, that's huge. I smiled, but the excitement was tempered with a quiet, steady responsibility. It is. But it's not about the spotlight. It's about proving the model works. If we can do this for Granny Lin, we can do it for the felt makers, the silk carvers, the potters. My mind was already racing ahead, seeing a network of tiny, resilient lights being kept burning against the globalizing darkness. I walked over to my desk. In a simple, rustic wooden frame, I had mounted 2 items side by side under glass. On the left, the glaring red of my divorce certificate. On the right, the faded lottery ticket with its string of life-altering numbers. They were no longer symbols of an ending and a chance beginning. They were my foundational documents. One represented the life that had to die for me to be reborn. The other represented the tool that made this new life possible. I looked at them every day, not with bitterness or even gratitude, but with a sober acknowledgement of my journey. Isabella came to stand beside me, looking at the framed mementos. You know, most people would have hidden those away, she mused. I need to see them, I said simply. They keep me honest. They remind me where I came from and what this is all for. It's not for me. Not really. It was true. The frantic need to prove myself to Liam, to the world, was gone. The legacy studio was my compass now, pointing me toward a future I was actively building, stitch by careful stitch, investment by thoughtful investment. The money was a river, and I was learning to channel it, to make it irrigate barren fields and bring forth forgotten beauty. The loneliness that had once threatened to drown me by the river was a distant memory. I was connected, to Isabella, to my team, to Granny Lin on her mountain, to a tapestry of artisans and stories that spanned the country. I had a purpose that was both fiercely ambitious and deeply humble. To be a custodian of time, to pick up the beautiful, fragile things the world was leaving behind and give them a new home, a new life. And in doing so, I was finally, truly giving myself a new life as well. The National Geographic feature was a tidal wave. Overnight, the Legacy Studio was thrust from a niche passion project into the international spotlight. Our website crashed twice from the traffic. My inbox, managed by a newly hired assistant, became a deluge of interview requests, collaboration proposals, and most importantly, messages from artisans and cultural preservation societies from every corner of the globe. It was exhilarating and terrifying. We were no longer just a studio, we were a movement. It was in this whirlwind that the first vulture appeared. His name was Julian Croft, and he was the founder and CEO of Aderna Collective, a luxury conglomerate known for acquiring bespoke brands, streamlining their production and marketing them to the global elite. He didn't call me himself, of course. A perfectly polished executive assistant scheduled a casual introductory meeting through my assistant. The venue was his choice, the penthouse suite of the city's most opulent hotel. I went alone, dressed in another one of my understated but exquisitely made outfits, a tailored blazer and trousers from a rising designer we were considering featuring. The penthouse was a monument to cold luxury, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling views of the smoggy city, and minimalist furniture that looked too expensive to actually sit on. Julian Croft was a man in his late 50s, with a tan that spoke of private islands and hair so perfectly silver it looked painted on. He rose to greet me, his smile a brilliant, calculated flash. "Amelia Thorne," he said, his voice a smooth, resonant baritone. He took my hand in both of his, a gesture meant to convey warmth but that felt possessive. "What an absolute pleasure. I've been following your work with the Legacy Studio. Truly inspiring." "Thank you, Mr. Croft," I said, extracting my hand and taking a seat on a white leather sofa that was as comfortable as a slab of granite. "Julian, please," he insisted, pouring me a glass of mineral water from a cut crystal decanter. "I'll be blunt, Amelia. What you've built in such a short time is remarkable. But you're thinking too small." He leaned forward, his eyes intent. "This one artisan at a time model is beautiful for PR, but it's not scalable. It's not a business, it's a hobby. Aderna can change that. We have the supply chains, the manufacturing partnerships in Italy and India, the marketing muscle to take these charming little crafts and turn them into global phenomena." He slid a glossy portfolio across the glass coffee table. It was filled with mock-ups. A Granny Lynn orchid cloth pattern, digitally replicated and printed on silk scarves. The intricate felted patterns of our northern nomads, simplified and mass-produced for throw pillows. The carved silk motifs, turned into a repeating print for ready-to-wear collections. Imagine, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, Granny Lynn's patterns in every Neiman Marcus. Her name on the lips of every fashion editor. We can make her a star. We can make you a star. I felt a cold nausea rise in my throat. He was talking about strip mining the very soul of the work we were trying to save. Digitally replicating the patterns severed the connection to the artisan, to the land, to the slow, sacred process. It would turn a library of cultural knowledge into a mere aesthetic, a trend. These artisans aren't looking to be stars, Julian, I said, my voice calm despite the anger simmering beneath. They're looking for dignity and a way to ensure their legacy isn't erased. What you're proposing is erasure by another name. His smile didn't falter, but it hardened at the edges. That's a very romantic notion, Amelia. But romance doesn't pay the bills in the long run. You're operating on a benefactor model. It's not sustainable. We're offering a partnership. Adorna would acquire a 51% stake in the Legacy Studio. You'd remain as the creative director, of course, with a very generous compensation package. We handle the business, and you can focus on the art. There was the offer. It was a gilded cage. He wanted to buy my credibility, my story, and then hollow out everything that made it meaningful. He saw our painstakingly built partnerships as an inefficient supply chain to be optimized. He saw our stories as marketing copy to be focus grouped. I'm afraid my vision for the Legacy Studio doesn't align with Adorna's, I said, standing up. I didn't touch my water. We're not for sale. Not a part of us. For a fraction of a second, the polished mask slipped, and I saw the ruthless predator beneath. His eyes narrowed and the smile vanished. That's a very final decision, Amelia. The market is a ruthless place. It's difficult to swim against the current alone. It was a threat thinly veiled. I've navigated rougher waters than you can imagine, Julian, I replied, meeting his gaze squarely. Good luck with your collections. I walked out of the penthouse, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a fierce, protective certainty. I had defended my territory. But I knew this wasn't over. Julian Croft was not a man who accepted no gracefully. The first shot across our bow came 2 weeks later. A prominent style and culture blog, one that had previously praised us, published a scathing piece. The headline read, Legacy or Luxury? The Hypocrisy of High-Priced Craft. The article accused us of poverty tourism, of exploiting vulnerable artisans for our own brand building, and of selling museum piece rags at obscene markups that the very communities who created them could never afford. It quoted an anonymous source from the luxury sector, questioning our financial transparency and our long-term viability. It was a hit piece, meticulously researched and perfectly timed. The comments section was a bloodbath. David was in my office within minutes, his face grim. This has Croft's fingerprints all over it, he said, throwing his tablet on my desk. That blog's editor is married to one of Adorna's VPs. My stomach churned. This was a battle I wasn't prepared for. I knew how to manage investments and nurture artisans, but a PR war? Isabella, now our official legal counsel, was already on the phone, her voice sharp. They're hitting us where we're most vulnerable, Amelia. The perception of authenticity is our currency. He's trying to devalue it. For a moment, a cold tendril of doubt wrapped around my heart. Was he right? Were we just another luxury brand hiding behind a noble cause? I looked at the photo on my desk. A picture of me and Granny Lynn, her gnarled hand resting on mine, both of us smiling. Oh, this was real. We don't fight back with more words, I said, my voice finding its strength. We fight back with action. With transparency. We launched our counteroffensive the next day. We published our entire business model on our website. We broke down the cost of every single Granny Lynn clutch, the material cost, the artisan's fee, which was substantial, the apprentice program funding, the overhead, and our slim profit margin. We posted videos of Granny Lynn and her granddaughter at the loom laughing. We featured the nomadic families, showing the vast, beautiful grasslands where they sourced their wool. Then we made our boldest move. We announced the Legacy Trust, a non-profit arm fully funded by me, separate from the studio's operating budget. The trust's sole purpose was to provide grants, equipment and educational resources to artisan communities directly, with no expectation of commercial return. The first grant was to Granny Lynn's village to build a proper weatherproof workshop and to fund a botanical survey to protect the wild orchid populations. The narrative flipped. The story was no longer about an expensive clutch. It was about a self-sustaining ecosystem of preservation. The media, smelling a more compelling story than corporate mudslinging, swung back in our favor. The blog that had attacked us quietly pulled the article. We had won the first round. But Julian Croft was just getting started. A month later, Maya returned from a scouting trip to a remote region known for its exceptional, naturally dyed indigo. She was furious. "Adorna was there," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "They got to the village elders before we did. They offered them cash up front, triple what we could offer per piece for an exclusive contract. They're going to set up a small factory, bring in their own trainers. They're not just competing with us, Amelia. They're trying to cut us off at the source." This was the real war. Adorna, with its bottomless pockets, could outbid us for every artisan, co-opting our entire mission and turning it into their own ethically washed production line. They would offer life-changing sums of money that no struggling community could refuse, only to eventually standardize, simplify and devalue the craft once they owned it. I felt a surge of panic, cold and sharp. This was a battle I couldn't win with transparency or heartwarming stories. This was a financial siege. I spent a sleepless night staring at the city lights from my window. I could tap into my wealth, engage in a bidding war with a billion-dollar conglomerate. But it would be a bottomless pit. And it would turn our mission into just another corporate acquisition fight, corrupting the very relationships we had built on trust and mutual respect. There had to be another way. A smarter way. The next morning I called David and Maya into my office. "We're not going to outbid them," I said. "We're going to outmaneuver them." I laid out my idea. We couldn't compete on Adorna's terms. So we would change the game. We would leverage the very thing Adorna lacked: authenticity and a story that couldn't be bought. We launched the Provenance Project. We partnered with a blockchain technology firm to create a secure, transparent, and unchangeable digital record for every single item we sold. A customer could scan a QR code and see not just a story but verifiable proof. A video of the artisan who made it, the date it was started and finished, the source of the raw materials, even the GPS coordinates of the workshop. It was a certificate of authenticity that was impossible to forge. Simultaneously, we doubled down on what Adorna could never replicate: the experience. We started offering legacy journeys, small, exclusive trips for our top clients and patrons to visit the artisan communities themselves, to meet the makers, to try their hand at the loom or the dye vat. It was tourism, yes, but it was deep, respectful, and immersive. Created ambassadors, not just customers. The Indigo Village? We didn't try to outbid Adorna's cash offer. Instead, we showed the elders the Provenance Project. We showed them how Adorna's factory model would erase their individual identities, folding them into a homogeneous Adorna craft label. We offered them a lower per-piece fee, but a share of the profits from the Provenance line and the legacy journeys. We offered them a future, not just a payout. The elders, after a long, tense deliberation, chose us. They chose legacy over lucre. It was a decisive victory. We had protected our source, and in doing so we had created a new, more resilient model. Adorna, for all its power, couldn't compete with a story that was verifiably, unshakably true. Julian Croft never contacted me again. I heard through the grapevine that Adorna quietly shelved its plans for a direct competitor to the legacy studio. The vulture had flown off to look for easier prey. Standing in the studio after the Indigo victory, surrounded by the vibrant, living results of our work, I felt a different kind of strength settle within me. It wasn't the cold, hard strength of revenge, or the frantic energy of building something new. It was the deep, resilient strength of a tree that had weathered a storm, its roots now driven deeper into the earth. I had faced down a corporate giant and won not by becoming more like them, but by becoming more truly, more fiercely myself. The Legacy Studio was no longer just a refuge for forgotten crafts. It was a fortress. And I was its unwavering guardian. The success of the Provenance Project solidified the Legacy Studio's reputation. We were no longer a charming novelty. We were a respected, innovative force in the intersection of commerce and culture. The fortress as I thought of it felt secure. My days were a fulfilling rhythm of strategy meetings, reviewing new artisan proposals with Maya, and planning the next legacy journey with David. My life had a purpose so consuming there was little room for anything else, and I preferred it that way. The past, with its betrayals and its pain, was a country I had no desire to revisit. Which is why the email felt like a ghost tapping on my shoulder. It was from a Catherine Thorne. The name sent an unwelcome jolt through my system. Liam's mother. During my marriage, our relationship had been a study in polite distance. She had never been unkind, but she had always made it clear that her son was her son, and I was a satellite of questionable orbit. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. The subject line was simple, a request. With a sense of foreboding, I opened it. Dear Amelia, I hope this email finds you well. I know this is unexpected, and after everything that happened, I have no right to ask for your time. But I find myself in a difficult position, and you are the only person I could think of who might understand. I am undergoing treatment for breast cancer. The prognosis is good, but the process is isolating. Liam is busy with his new life, and my husband has never been one for emotional heavy lifting. I know we were never close, but I remembered your strength, your clear-eyed way of looking at things. Would you be willing to meet me for tea? There is no one else I can talk to. Regardless of your decision, I wish you every happiness. Sincerely, Catherine. I leaned back in my chair, the cityscape outside my window suddenly blurring. Cancer. The word was a stark, ugly reality check. Despite my hardened heart towards the Thorne family, I couldn't muster any malice for a sick woman. But was this a genuine plea or another one of Liam's manipulations, using his mother as a pawn to get to me? I forwarded the email to Isabella with a single question. Thoughts? Her reply was almost instantaneous. Trap? Possibly. But the cancer part checks out. My mom's friend is in her garden club, heard about the diagnosis. Real. Up to you, but go in with armor on. I wrestled with it for 2 days. My every instinct screamed to delete it, to maintain the clean, hard lines I had drawn around my new life. But the memory of Catherine, a woman always perfectly composed, admitting to isolation, tugged at a thread of empathy I thought I'd snipped. Finally, against my better judgment, I replied. I named a quiet public tea room in a neutral part of the city. A battlefield of my choosing. She was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table. The change in her was shocking. The formidable, always put-together woman I remembered was gone. She was thinner, her tailored clothes hanging loosely on her frame. Her hair, once a carefully styled helmet of chestnut brown, was growing back in a soft silver fuzz after what must have been chemotherapy. But her eyes, when she looked up and saw me, held the same sharp intelligence. Amelia, she said, her voice softer than I remembered. Thank you for coming. Catherine, I nodded, taking the seat opposite her. I was sorry to hear about your diagnosis. A waitress came and went, leaving a pot of jasmine tea and a plate of delicate pastries between us. An awkward silence descended. You look, well, she finally said, her gaze taking in my simple but expensive silk blouse and the quiet confidence I now carried. Very well. I've seen the articles about your studio. It's remarkable what you've built. Thank you, I said, my tone neutral. I wouldn't make this easy for her. She had to be the one to lay her cards on the table. She took a slow sip of tea, her hand trembling slightly. The vulnerability was so uncharacteristic it felt like a performance. I suppose you're wondering why I asked you here, she began. It's not about Liam. I want to make that clear from the start. This is about me. She set her cup down, the china clinking softly. Seeing you, seeing what you've accomplished on your own, it's forced me to look at my own life. My entire identity has been being Liam's mother, Robert's wife. I curated the perfect home, hosted the perfect parties, supported my son's perfect career. And now, she gestured vaguely at herself, at her illness. Now, when I need something for myself, that identity feels like a hollow shell. Robert is playing more golf. Liam is, well, you know Liam. He sends flowers. Her words, laced with a bitter honesty, began to disarm me. This wasn't about Liam. This was about the universal currency of regret. He came to see me last week, she continued, her eyes meeting mine. He's not doing well, Amelia. That girl Chloe, she left him. Cleaned out what was left of his savings and moved to the coast with some musician she met. The project he was so proud of is floundering. He's drowning in debt. I said nothing. I took a slow sip of my tea, letting the floral steam warm my face. I felt nothing. No schadenfreude, no pity. It was like hearing a news report about a storm in a country I'd never visit. Catherine watched my lack of reaction and a sad, knowing smile touched her lips. You really are over him, aren't you? Completely. That chapter is closed, I said, my voice even. I envy you that, she whispered. The ability to close a chapter. My whole life is one long, unfinished book I no longer want to read. She took a deep breath. I'm not asking you to forgive him or me. I was a poor mother-in-law. I saw the way he took you for granted and I said nothing. I thought it was just how marriages were. I was wrong. The apology, unexpected and raw, hung in the air between us. It didn't magically heal old wounds, but it acknowledged they existed. What is it you want from me, Catherine? I asked gently. A little of your courage, she said, her eyes glistening. I'm selling the house. Robert is furious, but I can't breathe there anymore. It's a museum of a life I didn't choose. I want to travel. To see the places you work with in your studio. I want to do something that matters before it's too late. The request was so far from anything I had anticipated that I was momentarily speechless. She wasn't asking for money or for reconciliation with her son. She was asking for a roadmap. Courage isn't something I can give you, I said softly. It's something you find when you have no other choice. You've just found yours. I reached into my bag and pulled out a business card. It was plain, with only the studio's name and a general email address. The next legacy journey is to the northern grasslands, to work with the felt makers. It's not a luxury vacation. It's cold, the food is simple, and the bathrooms are rustic. But if you're serious, the application is on our website. Everyone is vetted. There are no special favors. I stood up, leaving enough cash on the table to cover the tea. I had given her what she asked for, not a handout but a hand up. The rest was up to her. She took the card, clutching it like a lifeline. Thank you, Amelia. I simply nodded and walked away. As I stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, I felt a strange, quiet catharsis. The encounter hadn't been a battle. It had been a surrender. Catherine's surrender to the truth of her life. And in a small way it felt like a final release for me too. The thorns no longer had any power over me, not even the power to evoke my anger. A few weeks later, while reviewing the applications for the legacy journey, I saw her name. Catherine Thorne. Her application essay was surprisingly thoughtful, speaking of a desire to understand the hands that hold our history. David, who didn't know her history, had flagged it as a strong candidate. I approved it without comment. The night before the trip, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The courage was there. I just needed permission to use it. Thank you. I didn't reply, but I smiled. The fortress walls were still high, but I had perhaps opened a small secret gate, not for them but for the part of me that understood that everyone, even a thorn, deserved a chance to rewrite their ending. The personal challenge hadn't broken me, it had subtly reshaped me. I had learned that strength wasn't just about defiance. It was also about the quiet power of a measured, merciful choice. My heart, I realized, wasn't a fortress to be sealed shut but a garden. And I was finally learning what to let grow. The airfield in the northern province was little more than a strip of cracked tarmac surrounded by a sea of swaying grass that stretched to the horizon. The sky was a vast, impossible blue, so immense it felt like it could swallow you whole. As our small charter plane bumped to a halt, I saw the group of Legacy Journey participants huddled together, their city clothes looking absurdly fragile against the rugged landscape. And among them, standing a little apart, was Catherine. She looked different already. Dressed in practical, sturdy clothing I'd never have imagined her in, her silver-fuzzed head was bare to the sun. She looked small and strangely vulnerable, but her posture was ramrod straight, her eyes taking in the wilderness with a mix of trepidation and awe. The journey to the nomadic family summer camp was a 2-hour drive in battered, open-top jeeps, jolting over tracks that weren't roads so much as suggestions in the earth. The wind whipped at us, carrying the scent of sage and damp soil. I watched Catherine. She didn't complain. She just held on, her knuckles white, her gaze fixed on the undulating horizon. We were greeted by the patriarch, Batu, a man with a face like weathered leather and a smile that cracked it wide open. His family lived in a cluster of jars, the traditional circular felt tents, their white domes brilliant against the green and gold of the grassland. That first evening we sat on low stools around a central iron stove, drinking salty milk tea from chipped bowls. The silence was profound, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant bleating of sheep. Catherine was quiet, observing everything. When Bata's wife, Sarangeril, began to demonstrate the first step of felting, carding the raw wool with two hand-held paddles, Catherine leaned forward, her focus absolute. "Hey, she asked, her voice unusually tentative. Sarangeril, who spoke no English, smiled and handed her the paddles. Catherine's first attempts were clumsy, the wool snagging and pulling. A flicker of the old impatience I remembered crossed her face, but then it vanished, replaced by a determined calm. She watched Sarangeril's fluid, practiced movements and tried to mimic them. It was a side of her I had never seen, the student, not the matriarch. The next few days fell into a rhythm dictated by the sun and the slow, ancient art of felting. We learned to wash the wool in the icy river, to dye it with natural pigments from roots and berries, and finally to felt it. This was the hardest part. It involved rolling the layered wool in a cloth, pouring hot water over it, and then rolling it back and forth for what felt like hours, using our body weight to mat the fibers together. It was grueling, monotonous work. My own shoulders ached, my back protested. I saw the other participants, wealthy philanthropists and art lovers, begin to flag, their initial enthusiasm waning under the physical reality of the craft. But not Catherine. She threw herself into the work with a ferocity that was startling. While others took breaks, she kept rolling, her jaw set, sweat beading on her brow. She didn't speak much, but she listened. Through our translator, she asked Bata questions about the migratory patterns of the herds, about the symbolism in the patterns his family used for generations. She was not just learning a craft, she was trying to understand a way of life. One afternoon I found her sitting by the river, massaging her sore hands. She looked up as I approached, her expression unguarded. "It's harder than it looks," she said, a wry smile touching her lips. "All those beautiful things in your studio, you forget the labor in them. The sheer, brute force labor." "That's the point," I said, sitting beside her on a large, smooth stone. "The value isn't just in the beauty. It's in the effort. It's in the story of the hands that made it." She nodded, looking out at the river. "I spent a lifetime avoiding effort. Or rather, directing it towards the wrong things. Polishing silver, planning menus. It all feels so meaningless out here." She was silent for a moment. "Liam called last night. He found out I was here with you. He was hysterical. Accused me of betraying him. I said nothing, just waited. I told him I was living my life and he needed to start living his," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of steel. "It was the first time I've ever spoken to him like that." She looked at me, her eyes clear. "I owe you an apology for that too. For letting him become that man. A mother's love can be a terrible, blinding thing." The apology out here under the wide sky felt more real than it had in the tea shop. It was no longer just words. It was a truth being lived. "You don't owe me anything, Catherine," I said quietly. "We all have our paths." The culmination of our week was a festival in a nearby larger settlement. Dozens of nomadic families gathered, their jars forming a temporary city on the plains. There was horse racing, wrestling, and a vibrant market. Our group scattered, exploring the stalls filled with handmade saddles, knives, and of course felt goods. It was there that the idol shattered. David found me, his face tight with anger. "We have a problem," he said, pulling me aside. "Look." He pointed to a stall at the edge of the market. It was piled high with felt bags, slippers, and wall hangings. The work was shoddy, the colors garish chemical dyes, the patterns a clumsy imitation of traditional motifs. And pinned to the front of the stall was a sign, written in both the local script and broken English, "Aderna Collective, Authentic Nomadic Craft." My blood ran cold. Julian Croft. He hadn't given up, he'd just found a cheaper, faster way to undermine us. He was flooding the local market with inferior, mass-produced knockoffs, devaluing the real thing and potentially luring away the very families we were trying to partner with by offering quick, easy cash for their designs. Before I could formulate a plan, I saw Catherine. She was standing in front of the Aderna stall, her body rigid with a fury I recognized all too well. She picked up a poorly made felt bag, her fingers tracing the sloppy stitching. Then to my astonishment she turned to the trader, a sharp-faced man from the city, and began to speak. Her voice, usually so measured, was loud and clear, cutting through the market noise. "This is a disgrace," she said in English, and through our translator her words were echoed for the growing crowd of locals. "This is not craft. This is theft. You steal their patterns, you use cheap materials, and you sell a lie." She held up the bag. "The wool is coarse, not from the local sheep. The dye will run. The pattern, this symbol here," she pointed a trembling finger, "it's for family protection. You've used it upside down. You have no respect." The trader scowled, waving her away, but the damage was done. The nomadic families who had been curious were now looking at the Aduna goods with suspicion and disdain. Catherine, a respected elder from the foreign group, had publicly called out the impostor. She wasn't finished. She turned to the crowd, her voice shaking with passion. "The Legacy Studio does not come here to take. They come to learn. They pay you for your true work, for your real knowledge. Do not trade your legacy for this trash." It was a performance, a declaration, and a redemption all rolled into one. In that moment she wasn't Liam's mother or Robert's wife. She was Catherine, guardian of beauty, defender of the authentic. The woman I had seen hosting tedious dinner parties was gone, replaced by a fierce, righteous queen of the grasslands. The Adurna trader, faced with a public relations disaster, started packing up his wares. The moment was ours. Later, back at the camp, I found her sitting by the gur, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of violet and gold. She looked exhausted but serene. "What you did today," I began. "It needed to be said," she interrupted softly. For the first time in a very long time I felt like something I said actually mattered. She looked at me, her eyes gleaming in the twilight. "You gave me that, Amelia. This trip, it gave me that." I sat beside her, the silence between us now comfortable, filled with the shared understanding of a battle fought and won. "When we get back," I said, the idea forming as I spoke, "the Legacy Studio is starting a new initiative. An elder council. We need advisors who understand quality, who have an eye for detail, and who aren't afraid to speak the truth. It would be a paid position." Catherine didn't answer for a long time. She just watched the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. "I think I would like that very much," she said finally, her voice steady. "I think I would be very good at it." Under the emerging stars, in the heart of that immense landscape, the last vestiges of my old life fell away. The past was not just closed, it had been transformed. The woman I had once seen as an adversary had become, if not a friend, then a formidable ally. The fortress walls hadn't been breached. They had simply expanded to include a new, unexpected guardian. The journey had been meant to preserve a legacy, and in the process, it had given Catherine a new one. And in a way I never could have predicted, it had given me a deeper, more complex understanding of my own. 5 years. The Legacy Studio was no longer a plucky startup. It was an institution. We had a permanent gallery in London, a waiting list for our journeys, and our provenance blockchain was the industry standard for ethical sourcing. The Elder Council, led with terrifying efficiency by Catherine, had become our secret weapon. Her impeccable taste and ruthlessness in weeding out anything less than extraordinary had elevated our brand to legendary status. She had found her purpose, and in doing so had become a different woman, softer in spirit, sharper in business. We never spoke of Liam. That chapter was a closed, forgotten book. My life had settled into a rhythm of profound satisfaction. The money was now a silent, powerful engine in the background, but my identity was entirely tied to the work. I was Amelia Thorne of the Legacy Studio, and that was enough. Which is why the invitation from the UNESCO World Heritage Center felt less like an honor and more like a natural progression. They were launching a global initiative, the Living Treasures Registry, aimed at creating a digital vault of the world's most endangered intangible cultural heritage. They wanted the Legacy Studio to be the primary private sector partner, tasked with creating the business and preservation models for the first 10 entries on the list. It was the ultimate validation. It was also a terrifying responsibility. The first entry on their list was the Sung textiles of the Lacrian Islands. I'd heard of them only in whispers, the holy grail of textile arts. Isolated on a remote Pacific archipelago, the Lacrian people wove a cloth so fine it was said to be as light as air, yet stronger than steel. The dyes were derived from secret bioluminescent deep-sea corals, making the fabric shimmer with an otherworldly captured light. Only 3 elder women were said to still know the full sacred process. It was dying with them. This was our crown jewel. The project that would define our legacy. Maya, David, Catherine, and I pored over the preliminary files. The challenges were immense. Geographical isolation, extreme sensitivity around cultural secrets, and the looming shadow of a Japanese conglomerate, Kensho Incorporated, which was also vying for UNESCO's favor with a proposal focused on high-tech replication and mass-market distribution. "We can't let Kensho get this," David said, his voice grim. "If they get their hands on those dye formulas, they'll patent them and the Lacrian people will never see a cent. They'll turn a sacred art into a gimmick for luxury sportswear." "We have to get there first," Maya insisted. "We need to gain their trust. It's the only way." A month later, I found myself on a rickety boat, chugging towards the emerald peaks of the Lacrian Islands. The air was thick, humid, and heavy with the scent of frangipani and salt. The main village was a collection of stilted huts overlooking a turquoise lagoon. It was paradise, but a paradise under threat. I could see the satellite dishes, the new concrete building that housed the Kensho Cultural Outreach Office. The vultures were already circling. We were granted an audience with the 3 weavers, Lonnie, Mail, and Kiana. They were ancient, their skin like wrinkled silk, their eyes holding the deep, patient knowledge of the ocean. They received us in a communal longhouse, the air cool and dark. Through a translator I made our pitch. I spoke of partnership, of the Provenance Project, of the Elder Council, of respect. I showed them the ledger of payments we'd made to Granny Lynn's village, the school we'd built in the grasslands. Lonnie, the eldest, listened, her hands, stained a permanent, faint blue, resting in her lap. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. "The men from the other company," she said, her voice a soft rasp. "They offer more money. Much more. They say they will make our patterns famous all over the world." My heart sank. It was the Indigo Village all over again, but on a much larger, more heartbreaking scale. "But," Lonnie continued, her sharp eyes fixed on mine, "they asked to take samples of our coral. They wanted to put our sacred songs into a machine. You speak of protecting. They speak of copying." There was a flicker of hope. "We want to learn," I said, leaning forward. "Not to copy but to understand. So we can help you ensure it never dies." The negotiation lasted for days. It was a delicate, grueling dance. They tested us. They made us prepare the plant fibers for the loom base until our fingers were raw. They watched our every move, our every reaction. Catherine, who had insisted on coming, was in her element. She didn't try to lead, she observed, she listened, she showed a reverence for the process that transcended language. Finally, on our last evening, Lonnie spoke. "We will partner with you. But there are conditions." "Name them," I said. "The coral. Its location is a secret known only to us. We will harvest it. No one else. You cannot have it. The songs we sing while weaving. They are prayers. They are not for recording. They are not for your blockchain. You will build a school here on this island. Not just for weaving. For our language, our stories. This will be the heart. And the first 10 pieces we create together, they will not be for sale. They will belong to the people. A seed for the future." They were not just conditions, they were a manifesto. They were drawing a line in the sand, protecting the soul of their craft in a way that was both fierce and brilliant. Kensho would never have agreed. Their model was based on extraction and replication. Ours was the only one that could bend to this will. "Agreed," I said without hesitation. "Every condition." The relief in the longhouse was palpable. We had done it. We had secured the crown jewel. The victory was short-lived. The next morning, as we were preparing to leave, a sleek, white speedboat pulled into the lagoon. Out stepped Kenji Tanaka, the sleek, impeccably dressed CEO of Kensho Incorporated, flanked by 2 assistants. He had clearly gotten word. He found me on the beach. "Miss Thorne," he said with a slight condescending bow. "A pleasure. I see you have been busy." "Mr. Tanaka," I nodded. "The Lacrian people have made their choice." "Have they?" He smiled, a thin, unpleasant expression. "Choices can be re-evaluated. My offer is still on the table. And it is significantly more generous than yours." I am prepared to offer them a 20% royalty on global sales. 20%. Your model, with its small-scale production, cannot possibly compete. He was right. On pure financial terms, he was obliterating us. 20% of a global mass-market line was a fortune beyond imagining for this village. Your offer requires them to give up the very thing that makes this art priceless, I countered, keeping my voice calm. They don't want a royalty. They want their legacy. Legacy is a luxury the poor cannot afford, Miss Thorne, he said, his voice dropping, losing its polite veneer. You are a sentimentalist. You are standing in the way of their prosperity for the sake of your own ego. His words were a scalpel designed to find my deepest insecurity. That I was just a rich woman playing at philanthropy, that my model was a vanity project. Before I could respond, a voice, clear and sharp, cut through the humid air. Her ego has built schools and sustained cultures. What has your pragmatism ever built besides profit? Catherine. She walked down the beach to stand beside me, a silk scarf, one of our first Granny Lynn collaborations, draped elegantly around her neck. She looked every inch the formidable aristocrat, and she directed her gaze at Tanaka with the force of a physical blow. You mistake principle for sentiment, young man, she continued, her tone icy. We are not merely offering a contract. We are offering a covenant. And you will find that when it comes to matters of the soul, money is a very poor bargaining chip. Tanaka was visibly thrown. He had not expected this. He had done his research on me, the divorce lottery winner. He had no file on the poised, lethal woman defending me. He recovered quickly, giving another shallow bow. A charming perspective. We shall see who the elders find more charming when they are presented with the final numbers. He turned and walked back to his speedboat, a cloud of defeat and fury hanging over him. We stood in silence, watching his boat disappear across the lagoon. He's not wrong, you know, I said quietly to Catherine. His offer would make them wealthy beyond their dreams. Poverty isn't just a lack of money, Amelia, she replied, not taking her eyes off the horizon. It's a lack of choice. A lack of power. You're giving them back their power. That is a currency he will never understand. We had won the battle on the beach. But the war for the Sung textiles was just beginning. We had the partnership, but Kensho had bottomless pockets and a ruthless determination. As I looked out at the pristine lagoon, I knew that preserving this paradise would require not just passion, but a level of strategic cunning I had never before needed. The crown jewel was in our hands, but its brilliance had just attracted the most dangerous thief of all. The 2 years following our return from the Lacrian Islands were a whirlwind of meticulous, sacred work. We built the school just as promised. It wasn't a flashy concrete block, but a structure of native wood and thatch, designed by the islanders themselves, open to the sea breezes. It became a hub, a place where children learned the old songs alongside mathematics, where the weaving techniques were taught to a new, eager generation under the watchful eyes of Lonnie, Mail, and Kiana. The first 10 pieces of Sung textile created under our partnership were breathtaking. A shawl that seemed woven from moonlight and sea foam, a ceremonial robe that held the shifting colors of the lagoon at dusk. As agreed, they were not for sale. They were ceremonially presented to the people, a tangible promise of a future they controlled. We documented the process with a reverence bordering on devotion, capturing the rhythm of the looms, the gathering of the plants, the sacred silent harvest of the coral, all without ever revealing the secrets themselves. Our global launch was not a product drop. It was a cultural event. We secured a partnership with the Victoria and Albert Museum in London for an exclusive exhibition, Luminous Legacy, the Sung Textiles of Lacria. The centerpiece wasn't for sale, it was the story. The story of the 3 weavers, of the school, of a people choosing to protect their soul. The few pieces we did offer, small exquisite panels meant for private collectors and museums, sold for astronomical sums within minutes, their provenance blockchain certificates attesting to their unparalleled authenticity and ethical origin. The funds generated were immediately funneled back into a permanent trust for the Lacrian community, managed by a board that included the elders themselves. We had done it. We had created a perfect, self-sustaining model that respected the art at its core. Kensho Incorporated, however, did not surrender. Kenji Tanaka, humiliated and enraged, launched his counterattack. It was not a frontal assault but a campaign of whispers and shadows. A leaked report from a textile expert questioned the durability of the Sung textiles. Anonymous blogs run by shell companies began a smear campaign, accusing the legacy studio of cultural imperialism and hoarding a global treasure for the elite. It was a masterclass in distortion designed to chip away at our most valuable asset, our integrity. The pressure was immense. Museum trustees grew nervous. Journalists called with pointed questions. David and Maya worked around the clock, fending off the attacks with facts and transparency, but the fog of doubt was beginning to spread. The final, desperate blow came 3 days before the V&A exhibition opening. I was in my office reviewing the final layouts when Isabella called, her voice tight with fury. "They're suing," she said without preamble. "Kensho. They're filing an injunction to stop the exhibition. They're claiming the Lacrian elders lacked the mental capacity to understand the contract they signed with us, that we took advantage of them. They've produced medical experts who will testify to the age-related vulnerabilities of the weavers." I felt the floor drop out from under me. It was so vile, so insidiously cruel that for a moment I couldn't breathe. They were going to paint Lonnie, Mail, and Kiana as confused old women, and us as predatory manipulators. It was a move designed not just to win, but to destroy everything we stood for. "We'll fight it, Amelia," Isabella said, her voice steely. "We have the signed contracts, the video of the negotiations, the testimonials from the entire village. We will bury them in court. But an injunction, if it's granted even temporarily, the press will have a field day. The exhibition could be ruined." I hung up, my hands trembling. This was it. The ultimate test. Tanaka wasn't just after the textiles. He was trying to shatter the very foundation of trust we had built. I looked at the framed divorce certificate and lottery ticket on my desk. They were reminders of a different kind of battle, one fought in the confines of a broken heart. This battle was for something infinitely larger. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just be a defender. I had to become a predator. I called a private number. It was for a man my wealth managers referred to as a strategic intelligence consultant. His name was Mr. Eris, and he specialized in navigating the dark waters of corporate warfare. I gave him one instruction: find me Kenji Tanaka's weakness. Not his company's. His. The information came back within 48 hours. It wasn't about embezzlement or fraud. Tanaka was clean, at least on paper. His weakness was his ambition. Kensho Incorporated was his life's work, but he was not the majority shareholder. He answered to a conservative old money board of directors in Tokyo who valued reputation above all else. And Tanaka had a secret, failing passion project, a sustainable fashion line that was bleeding money, a venture the board deeply disliked. The day before the injunction hearing, I didn't send my lawyers. I went myself with Isabella in a single slim folder. I requested a private meeting with Tanaka in his hotel suite. He was smug, expecting a plea for mercy. "Miss Thorne. Have you come to see reason?" "No, Mr. Tanaka. I've come to give you a choice," I said, my voice calm as I took a seat. I placed the folder on the glass table between us. "You will drop your lawsuit immediately. You will issue a public statement retracting all allegations and affirming the Lacrian people's sovereignty over their cultural heritage." He laughed, a short, derisive sound. "And why would I do that?" I opened the folder. It contained 2 documents. The first was a detailed financial analysis of his Kensho Green Line, highlighting the massive losses and the board's growing impatience. The second was a proposal. A proposal for the legacy studio to acquire the failing Kensho Green Line, rebrand it under our umbrella, and use its existing, albeit flawed, infrastructure to launch a new, authentically sustainable collection in partnership with our grassland felt makers and indigo dyers. It was a lifeline, a way for him to save face and turn his failure into a win. His smile vanished. He stared at the documents, his face a mask of conflicting emotions: outrage, shock, and a flicker of desperate hope. "This is blackmail," he hissed. "This is business," I corrected him softly. "You tried to destroy what I built. I am offering you a chance to become a part of it instead. You can walk away from this as the villain who tried to steal from indigenous elders, or you can walk away as the visionary who helped launch the most ambitious ethical fashion line in the world. The choice is yours." I stood to leave. "The offer is valid for the next 24 hours. After that, we will see you in court." And Mr. Eris sends his regards. The mention of the consultant's name was the final, decisive blow. He knew I knew everything. He knew the battle was lost. The next morning the injunction was withdrawn. An hour later, Kensho Incorporated issued a stunning press release, praising the Legacy Studios' groundbreaking ethical model, and announcing a new strategic partnership. The smear campaigns vanished overnight. The V&A exhibition opened to universal acclaim. It wasn't just a display of textiles. It was a testament to resilience, a celebration of a victory that was cultural, ethical, and personal. Standing in the hushed, reverent gallery, watching people from all over the world gaze in wonder at the luminous cloth, I felt a peace so profound it was almost dizzying. Later that evening at the private reception, Catherine found me. She handed me a glass of champagne, her eyes shining with pride. "You were magnificent," she said. "You didn't just beat him. You redeemed him." "I offered him a better story," I said, clinking my glass against hers. "That's all we've ever been doing. Offering a better story." As the party swirled around me, I slipped away to a quiet balcony overlooking the London lights. The journey that had begun in the bitter despair of a divorce office had led here, to this moment of undeniable hard-won triumph. The money had been the seed, but the life I had built, the studio, the partnerships, the friendships, the purpose, was the harvest. The framed divorce certificate and lottery ticket in my office were no longer symbols of an ending and a beginning. They were coordinates on a map, marking the starting point of a voyage that had taught me everything. That true power isn't in wealth or revenge, but in the courage to build something beautiful and the ferocity to protect it. That the past cannot be changed, but the future can be woven, thread by deliberate thread, into a tapestry of your own design. My phone buzzed. It was a photo from Lonnie's granddaughter from the school in Lacria. She was holding up a small, imperfect but radiantly beautiful piece of woven cloth. The message read, "My first one. For you." I looked from the photo to the glittering city below, a smile spreading across my face, light and free. The stolen years had been returned not just to me but to Granny Lynn, to Bata's family, to Lonnie, Mail, and Kiana. The legacy was no longer just theirs. It was mine too. And it was only just beginning. The end.